What if the version of you who already has everything, peace, power, purpose, was never a future destination, but a frequency you're already entangled with? In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called entanglement, where two particles, once connected, remain so deeply bonded that when one changes, the other does too, instantly, even across galaxies. Like twin clocks ticking in perfect sync, shift one, and the other moves too. You're not separate from your highest self, you're woven into it. You've felt it before, in stillness, déjà vu, or moments of sudden clarity. The quantum field doesn't respond to what you want, it mirrors who you are being. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been. Because if you were never separate, then all that's missing is the shift in how you see yourself. Stay with me. Next, we'll explore why you haven't jumped yet. So why haven't you made the jump? Why, despite all your effort, intentions, and spiritual tools, does the reality you long for still feel slightly out of reach? Here's the quiet truth most people overlook. It's not because your goal is too big or your vision too far. It's because you're still synchronized with the identity that created the current version of your life. The version rooted in doubt, in delay, in subtle self-sabotage. Most people try to shift their reality from the outside in setting goals, repeating affirmations, visualizing dreams. Even in spiritual circles, we often attempt to manifest from the same nervous system, same patterns, same survival-based self. But that's the paradox. You can't access a new timeline through the emotional frequency of the old one. You can't jump while clinging to the self you're meant to outgrow. Think about either of you ever noticed how you return to the same habits, same fears. Even when your mind wants something different, you're not broken. You're just entangled with an identity that's expired. It's not your vision that needs fixing. It's your vibration that needs updating. The quantum field, as research from Princeton and the University of Vienna confirms, doesn't obey effort. It reflects coherence. It responds when your energy, emotions, and subconscious are in harmony with the version of you that already lives what you're seeking. You've felt that version before, maybe for a moment, in a place that made you feel whole, or in a decision that came from stillness rather than fear. You'll feel it again. But first, something has to collapse. The identity you no longer need. So let me ask, are you still trying to change your life from the perspective of who you've always been? Or are you ready to become the signal of who you're meant to be? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt the pull of your future self? If this resonates, tap like, subscribe, and gently ring the bell so you never miss a shift that could change your timeline. Because up next, we'll go deeper into the science and soul of quantum entanglement and how real quantum jumping begins inside you. Stay with me. What if every version of you, confident, healed, free, thriving, already exists, not in imagination, but in the quantum field, waiting to be activated? This isn't fantasy. It's quantum entanglement. In simple terms, it means your energy is already connected to every possible version of yourself. Like strands of light across a vast web, one move here sends a signal across timelines. Studies from the University of Vienna and Caltech have shown that entangled particles affect one another instantly even if they're light years apart. Now imagine that's you. When you shift your internal state, your core beliefs, your emotional baseline, your habitual reactions, you're not just thinking differently. You're tuning into a different version of you. That's quantum jumping. But here's what most people miss. Quantum jumping isn't about closing your eyes and picturing a better life. It's not about pretending. It's about recalibrating your identity so powerfully that the field has no choice but to reflect it. Your state is more than mood. It's your embodied frequency, what you believe is possible, how you respond to setbacks, what emotions you wake up with, and whether your nervous system is wired for survival or expansion. That's what the quantum field listens to. Not your words, not your wish lists, your signal. So ask yourself, what emotional weather do you live in every day? Are you rehearsing a past that keeps looping, or aligning with a future that feels light and alive? You've felt that clarity before, even briefly. Maybe in nature, maybe during heartbreak, maybe at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling knowing something has to shift. That knowing wasn't random. It was you, entangled with you. Quantum manifestation isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's the art of remembering, reconnecting, and stabilizing in the self that's already whole. You don't force timelines open. You match them. And when the match is true, reality has to bend. Just like the twin clocks of entanglement, your shift here echoes there. What do you think? Have you ever felt like you were standing between two worlds? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Because next, we'll dive into the real signs you're already sensing a timeline shift and how to follow it home. Stay close. It gets clearer. Have you ever made a sudden decision that felt like it came from somewhere beyond logic yet it changed everything? That's not coincidence. That's a quantum ripple. One of the clearest signs you're sensing a timeline shift is when life starts to feel misaligned, like wearing a jacket that no longer fits. You wake up with a quiet knowing, this isn't who I'm meant to be anymore. You might feel restless in spaces that once felt familiar, or pulled toward something bigger, even if you can't name it yet. That's your future self, whispering through the veil. Sometimes it's a bold leap move, a breakup, a quit without a plan moment. Other times it's subtle, music that hits differently, a sudden urge to clear your space, or tears that come without warning. These are quantum echoes. The field is stirring. You're not breaking down, you're vibrating out of sync with an old identity, and the new one is already calling. Studies from Stanford Center for Consciousness Research suggest that emotional dissonance often precedes major neurological shifts, your brain literally rewiring to meet a new reality. So if life feels unstable, unfamiliar, or even lonely lately, you might be mid-jump, and that's powerful. Have you felt this? A nudge you can't explain? A sense that you were born to live more? Let me know in the comments. Your story matters. Because up next, we explore a truth even deeper. You are the observer, the one who collapses timelines with attention alone. Stay with me. This is where quantum becomes personal. What if reality doesn't happen to you but because of you? Not through effort or force, but through attention. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon known as the observer effect. It reveals something astonishing. The very act of observing a particle determines how it behaves. Before you look, it exists as a wave of possibilities, but once observe it, collapses into one specific form. This isn't just theoretical. It's the foundation of quantum mechanics, confirmed by countless double-slit experiments from labs like Princeton and the Max Planck Institute. Now bring that closer to home. You are the observer, and every moment you focus your awareness, you collapse a timeline. The question is, which version of you is doing the observing? Is it the self wired for fear, scarcity, and reaction, or the self that breathes from clarity, trust, and expansion? Because the quantum field doesn't respond to fleeting thoughts or spoken affirmations. It responds to coherency, stable, consistent frequency over time. Not what you say, but who you are being behind your eyes, when no one's watching. Imagine two people standing in the same room. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. One collapses a future of growth, the other repeats the past. Same space, different timelines. What makes the difference? The observer. The identity driving the perception. And you've felt this, haven't you? That moment when your body wanted to react, but a deeper part of you paused and chose differently. That pause, that's the portal. That's when you stepped out of habit and into creation. You became the one who collapses a new outcome. So what version of you is standing behind your choices today? And if you slowed down, what would you choose to see, feel, and embody next? Let me know in the comments. This is where transformation begins. Because up next, we'll explore the 3-step method that helps you shift timelines with precision. Witness, sever, choose. Don't miss it. This is where it gets real. What if the first step to changing your life isn't action but attention? Like watching a river without needing to swim, the power begins in stillness. Step 1. Witness. Sit with yourself, not to judge, not to fix, but simply to see. Observe your inner world like a quiet field at sunrise. What beliefs surface in silence? What patterns replay when no one's around? Notice how your body reacts. Do your shoulders tense when someone questions your worth? Does your breath shorten when uncertainty appears? These are more than habits, they are signals of the identity you've been unconsciously living from. Research in somatic therapy and neuroplasticity shows that non-judgmental awareness begins to dissolve deeply rooted emotional patterns. When you witness without resistance, your nervous system starts to rewire. This is where shift begins, not with willpower, but with presence. And maybe you've already felt it, that quiet inner nudge that says, "This isn't me anymore." Have you ever noticed a moment where you paused instead of reacted? That moment was a crack in the timeline. A portal. What do you see when you sit with your own mind? What version of you shows up in the silence? Let me know in the comments. Your reflection could unlock someone else's. Next, we'll step into the threshold that many resist. Sever, and why discomfort in this phase is not a sign of failure, but a marker of expansion. Stay close. This is where identity begins to shift at the root. What if letting go isn't about losing yourself, but finding the self you've outgrown? Step 2. Sever. This is where the shift deepens. It's not about changing your life, it's about changing your identity. And it begins with a quiet, powerful declaration. I am no longer this version. Say it not with force, but with truth. You don't need to shout it, you just need to mean it. Expect resistance. The body may tighten. Old stories may rise. That's not failure. That's the nervous system recalibrating. Studies from Stanford's Department of Psychology show that identity disruption often triggers emotional discomfort because the brain is trying to protect what feels familiar, even if it no longer serves you. Severing is not about erasing the past. It's about disidentifying from the patterns that kept you looped inside it. You are not your coping mechanisms. You are not the fear that once protected you. Imagine shedding a skin knot to escape, but to breathe deeper. Have you ever felt that subtle inner whisper? This doesn't fit me anymore. That's the beginning of severance. And the more you lean in, the more space you create for what's next. What part of your identity are you ready to outgrow? What behaviors, beliefs, or boundaries no longer reflect who you're becoming? Share with me in the comments. I'd love to hold that space with you. Next, we step into choose, where the future is no longer imagined, but embodied. Stay with me. This is where you begin to live as the timeline you've already called in. What if true transformation isn't about what you start doing, but about what you stop accepting? Step 3. Choose. This is where the quantum shift becomes real. Not in theory, in action. But not the action you think. Don't ask, what would my future self do? Instead, ask, what would they no longer tolerate? Because evolution isn't built on ambition, it's built on boundaries. The version of you who is calm, clear, and empowered doesn't explain themselves to chaos. They don't overcommit to stay liked. They don't sacrifice their sleep, their peace, their body signals. Choosing that version isn't one dramatic leap, it's a daily micro shift. Try this. Write one sentence each morning. The new me no longer. Then live it. One breath, one moment, one clear no. That's how identity locks in. Studies in behavioral neuroscience show that small, repeated adjustments create long-term neural change. That's how you build coherence, by becoming predictable to the quantum field, not through words, but through patterns. What's one thing the new you would no longer entertain? A habit, a thought, a dynamic? Let me know in the comments. Your clarity might just spark someone else's shift. And stay close, because next, we enter the most misunderstood phase of transformation: recalibration. When your external world begins to shake, not because you're broken, but because you're finally aligned. This is where most people turn back, but you won't, because now you remember who you are. What if the confusion you feel after a major breakthrough isn't a collapse, but a clearing? Imagine it like an earthquake, not to destroy, but to shift the foundation beneath your feet. Recalibration is that sacred moment after a quantum jump, when your external world hasn't yet caught up to your internal shift. It's the void between the old and the new. And yes, it can feel disorienting, even lonely. But that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're rearranging. You might notice ghost signals, old relationships resurfacing, familiar temptations whispering, habits you thought you released quietly sneaking back in. These aren't failures. They're echoes. Residual energy looking for closure. Psychologists call this pattern reactivation, where the nervous system retests old wiring to confirm new direction. So, if the past knocks, don't invite it back in. Just recognize it, name it, and hold your ground. More subtly, recalibration can feel like fog, restlessness, a strange emptiness as if the skin of your former self is gone, but the new one hasn't fully formed. This in-between is the nervous system updating its baseline. According to research from the HeartMath Institute, emotional coherence takes time to stabilize after internal shifts. During this window, your system is learning how to trust a new identity, how to stay regulated in the unknown. So how do you hold your frequency through the static? Start with your breath. Not shallow autopilot breathing, but intentional, deep presence. Breath work, especially slow rhythmic cycles, like the 4 to 7 -8 technique, soothes the vagus nerve and helps your body anchor into safety. Your breath is the bridge between the seen and unseen. Then, write. Not to analyze, but to listen. Try somatic journaling. Begin with, "Today my body feels," and allow your nervous system to speak before your mind interrupts. Studies from UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center show that writing from the body's perspective reduces cortisol and helps integrate new emotional states. And don't underestimate nature. Grounding practices like walking barefoot on earth, standing beneath trees, or simply placing your hands on your heart in the sunlight remind your cells that safety exists without control. The earth holds stable resonance. When you touch it, you remember yours. Have you ever been in that strange phase after the decision, before the arrival, when the world seems to pause around you, waiting? That's not failure. That's the field realigning. That's you, mid-recalibration. What's helped you hold steady when life feels unstable? I'd love to hear in the comments. Your tools might become someone else's lifeline. And stay with me, because next, we step into Anchor, how to lock in your new frequency and protect the self you've just chosen, even when the world hasn't yet reflected it back. This is where the shift becomes stable. What if the real work begins after the shift? After the jump? After the clarity? After the breakthrough? Anchor is the phase where you hold the version of yourself you've chosen even when the world hasn't caught up yet. This isn't about forcing outcomes. It's about maintaining frequency. Like a tuning fork held steady while the room adjusts around it. This is where life will test you, not to punish you, but to see who's answering now. When the old pattern reappears, do you collapse back into it? Or do you respond from your new identity, even if it feels unfamiliar? That moment, the pause before reaction, is where anchoring happens. Quantum physics reminds us, the field mirrors coherence, not declarations. You don't need to repeat affirmations all day. You just need to act and respond from your new frequency, especially when it's hardest to do so. Anchoring is subtle but powerful. It happens when you no longer chase closure, but choose peace. When you stop over-explaining, because your energy speaks louder than your words. When you walk away from what no longer matches, not from anger, but from alignment. Have you felt that? The strength of choosing silence over self-betrayal? And here's something most people overlook. Your environment is part of the field. It reflects and reinforces your frequency. If you surround yourself with people who constantly remind you of who you used to be, who feed old doubts, replay old stories, or downplay your growth, it becomes harder to hold your vibration, not because you're weak, but because coherence requires support. Neuroscience studies from Oxford show that identity consolidation is significantly influenced by social reinforcement. Translation: you can't fully anchor a new self in an old system. So ask yourself, what relationships support the frequency you're becoming? What spaces make you breathe deeper, not shrink smaller? Who holds you accountable to your highest, not your history? Anchoring is also about structure, rituals, rhythms. You don't need more effort, you need more consistency. Maybe it's your morning tea in silence, a 5-minute walk without your phone, a Sunday check-in where you ask, am I still aligned with who I said I was becoming? These small acts signal to the quantum field, I'm holding steady, and the field always responds to clarity over time. This phase isn't glamorous, it's grounding, but it's sacred, because this is where the shift becomes real, where the new timeline starts to lock in. You are no longer manifesting in bursts. You are living your signal. What's one practice you've used to stay anchored when the world pulls at your edges? What helped you stay you when things got loud? Share it in the comments, someone else might need it right now. And don't go far, because next, we explore one of the most misunderstood forces in manifestation: cycle and stability. Why your frequency must be repeated to become reality, and how to honor the seasons of inner transformation. This is where quantum becomes sustainable. Change doesn't happen all at once, it spirals. Have you noticed how healing comes in waves, not straight lines? This is the truth of cycle and stability, the phase where your new identity becomes permanent, not through grand gestures, but through quiet repetition. You don't have to prove anything to the universe. You just have to keep choosing your new self again and again, especially in the small, forgettable moments. The nervous system, according to research from MIT's McGovern Institute, learns through pattern reinforcement, not pressure. So when you slip, when you catch yourself reacting from the old self, don't shame it. Witness it. Recalibrate. Return. That return is not failure. That return is the work. Every time you realign, you reinforce. Every time you say, "This version of me responds differently," you hardwire that frequency into your field. Think of nature, how the moon doesn't force itself to glow. It follows rhythm. It becomes full by returning to its cycle. You, too, are cyclical. Anchoring your vibration means respecting your timing, your seasons, your breath. You don't need to stay perfect. You need to stay present. So ask yourself gently, what would it feel like to choose your future self just for today? Not forever. Just now. Just this one moment. Have you felt the power of small, consistent shifts? What reminded you that real change lives in repetition? I'd love to hear in the comments. And stay with me, because next, we arrive at the most beautiful part of the process: integration. When you no longer have to try, because you are. When your new self stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like home. What if one day you woke up and you weren't trying anymore? Not trying to be confident, not trying to be calm, not trying to be someone new. You just were. That's the moment of natural integration, when your chosen identity stops feeling like a role and starts feeling like home. At first, every shift feels intentional, even a little unnatural, like walking in new shoes. You have to think about your posture, your steps, your rhythm. But then, something changes. Your nervous system catches up. Your body stops asking, "Are we safe in this version?" and starts responding from trust. The old habits may still pass by, but they no longer grip you. Triggers don't trigger. You pause without forcing it. You breathe without bracing. You answer life from a new center, quiet, grounded, true. This isn't perfection. This is coherence. When your inner world and outer expression finally match. Research from Dr. Joe Dispenza's neuroplasticity studies shows that sustained identity, shifts practiced long enough, begin to rewire not only the brain, but the autonomic body, meaning the new you becomes default. It no longer needs to be earned. You'll know you've reached this phase when peace becomes your baseline, not your pursuit. When boundaries feel natural, not confrontational. When gratitude arises spontaneously, not because you're doing the work, but because your frequency holds it without trying. Have you tasted that feeling even briefly? When you weren't performing, fixing, proving, just being? I'd love to know. Share it in the comments. Your moment may remind someone else that ease is possible. And stay here with me, because next, we bring it all together in our closing reflections, reminders, questions, and small sacred actions to help you carry this alignment into your real life. You've come far. Let's make it last. What if today, just today, you chose to live as if the shift had already happened, not waiting for proof, not needing permission, but simply being the version of you who has already jumped? Because here's the quiet truth. When you act as if something is normal, the universe begins to treat it that way too. You're not faking, you're stabilizing. Every identity needs reinforcement. And it begins with one real, grounded decision in your breath, your voice, your presence. So start small. Choose just one moment today to respond from the new you. Maybe it's how you speak to yourself in the mirror. Maybe it's choosing stillness instead of reacting. Maybe it's walking away from what no longer fits. It doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be honest. And here's a powerful exercise. Name the timeline you're leaving. Give it a title. Write it down. The version of me who hides to stay safe. The timeline where I explain my worth. And then declare the one you're stepping into. The version of me who trusts before certainty. The timeline where peace is my default. When you name it, you claim it. The quantum field responds to that kind of clarity because identity declaration is a frequency broadcast. That's not poetry. That's energy mechanics. If this video sparked something inside you, if it didn't just teach, but reminded you of something you already know deep in your bones, then you've already started the jump. You're already in motion. Don't let a scroll or an algorithm pull you out of this state. Hold it. Protect it. So I invite you now. What timeline are you choosing to live in? Drop it in the comments. Let the act of writing it make it real. Let your words become a signal, not just to the world, but to your own cells. This is how we shift, not with performance, but with coherence. And if this video felt meaningful to you, if it helped you reconnect with your power, your clarity, or your calm, consider liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Not just to support the channel, but to tell the algorithm, this is the kind of energy I want more of in my life. That's a quantum signal too. You've walked through the portal. You've witnessed, severed, chosen, anchored, integrated. Now, you are the frequency. You're not becoming. You are. And reality is catching up.